one of the things that I thought was really interesting there was that he said, riches are easily seen, but wealth is hidden.
Welcome to the Four Fires Podcast, where we talk about winning in all four of the essential areas of life.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Four Fires Podcast. Jeff and I are here today. My name's Alan Kemper. We are here to have a fun discussion about wealth and about money.
Kind of just the understanding of it. I think there's some misconceptions about like what it means to do well in the professional fire.
Yeah, well, and how that impacts a lot of your other fires too.
Mm-hmm.
Your people fire, and even to some degree your physical fire. We can talk about that in just a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to get this conversation started off. Jeff, you and I were kicking around this. This was kind of a byproduct of a conversation that we were having on an airplane as we were going out to Montana. But this book that I've been reading called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I just wanted to see if we could kind of replay that conversation for some of our listeners, because you do a lot of financial coaching and helping people build budgets.
Right. Helping people with their personal finance and helping them tell their money where to go instead of wondering where it went. In our conversation, you talked about how the book, Psychology of Money, talks about the difference between rich and wealthy. Mm-hmm. So why don't you just dive in and explain that
it's a
bit.
really interesting book. I highly recommend it. If it's a great audio book, great physical book to read, because it uses a lot of stories, a lot of metaphors, and it's really small chunks so you can kind of digest it all. But in one of the chapters, it talks about the difference between wealth, being wealthy, and being rich. And the distinction that the author makes is that rich is about having income. You have money coming in that you can spend on goods.
Life.
Yeah, you have access on a monthly basis to make some purchasing choices that the average person cannot make. Okay. Whether that means that you can afford to finance a car or even buy a car outright, or you can go on fancy trips, or you can buy all the nicest clothing or tractors or whatever it is that you can afford to buy things. And the distinction that he was making in this book is that riches is about income. Wealth is about stored or unspent decisions to purchase goods and services. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting there was that he said, riches are easily seen, but wealth is hidden. Because by definition, wealth is the unspent
that you don't see.
Consumption. It's unspent consumption. And so that you're not truly wealthy if you've used all of your income to consume. You're rich.
Right.
But you're not wealthy. You can be rich without being wealthy. Mm-hmm. Basically, that means you're spending all of your money and saving none. Mm-hmm. You can be wealthy but not look rich, meaning that you're saving all of your money.
Yeah.
And it's also possible for you to have amassed such a level of income and such a level of savings that you can both be wealthy and rich. Mm-hmm. But to make a distinction between those, just because you look rich does not mean that you are wealthy.
Definitely not. What I see is that most people who look rich are barely scraping by every month to pay for all of those things that make them look rich.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings that my grandfather used to say is big hat, no cattle.
Yeah, that's it.
He's got the big hat, but the modern version of that one might be a big truck, no bank account,
something like that.
And I think one of the things that's interesting in that discussion is that, he went through in this book, and this is a separate chapter, and he talked about that part of what makes someone successful financially has very little to do with education level and has everything to do with what behaviors we enact in our lives.
That's it, yeah.
He made used an example of an Ivy League educated investment banker who had lots of high earnings, but made some decisions lifestyle-wise and professionally that when he died, he had nothing to his name. And that there was another scenario of a guy who was a janitor and lived in a little 2-bedroom house his whole life. And when he died, gave away $8 million to a lot of different philanthropies and community organizations, and that he was wealthy, and that the investment banker, the Ivy League educated investment banker, was poor, and that those outcomes were completely independent of the education level around the topic. And he's talking about finance.
This is in Psychology of Money?
Yeah. That it's one of the few spaces in our world where you can have outcomes be so drastically different based on the educational preparation, or regardless of the educational preparation. And so he made an example of, like, if you're a brain surgeon, you've got this like person who's like legitimately been trained to be a brain surgeon, and then you have a janitor who's also going to try to perform brain surgery. Like, it's not going to. This is not, the outcomes here are not going to be the same.
No,
education really, really matters. But in finance,
but with building wealth.
Yes.
It doesn't matter with your level of education.
It only matters about your behaviors.
About your behavior, yeah.
And so I guess the conversation today, if we were going to get to the root of having some impact here, is, we talk about the 4 fires. There's awareness, there's ownership, and there's discipline.
What is it that drives your behavior? Because I've heard it said that personal finance is 20% head knowledge. It's just like elementary math. It's just adding and subtracting.
Yep.
And it's 80% behavior or emotions. Or like, what are the things that drive you to go finance the brand new car that you can't afford?
So you do a lot of coaching for people as they're trying to think about their getting a budget in line, and
mostly it's just starting out with the awareness, because most people are unaware of how much they spend. So the budget is really just like, let's just write it down. Well, there was one couple that was actually in a small group that my wife and I did, and it was a Financial Peace University small group, and they did their budget, and they were like, oh my gosh, we spent X amount this year on Amazon. And they're like, we don't even know what we bought. But it was a lot of money that they're like, it was just $10 and $20 yourself to death.
Yeah.
And so that's what the budget mostly does. Just like write it down. We talk about you can't manage what you don't measure. So the budget is just write it down so that you can at least have an idea and say, man, okay, we don't need to spend $800 a month at restaurants. We could cut that in half. And we could be putting that $400 into a Roth IRA and be like working on building some wealth over the years.
Yeah.
So that's where we start really with the budget, is just starting with that awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the so there's an awareness piece, and I like that idea of, like, you got to write it down. Like,
you got to know you have to know your numbers.
That's right. And that's so true. I can tell a good business owner versus a crappy business owner. Because if you ask them, like, a good business owner, they always know their numbers. They know what their margins are. They know what their revenue was last month. They know what it was the month before that. They know cost of goods sold. Like, it's in their head. They don't have to go look it up.
Right. I've heard you say that the average business owners talk about revenue. The good ones talk about profit. And the great ones talk about wealth creation. And so even with those 3 levels, they probably know more specific numbers as you go up that list. Like the guy who's only concerned with revenue, maybe he doesn't even know what his margin is. He's just like, oh, I just know we did this much in revenue. And
yeah, I mean, I've talked to guys running $19 million companies, and you ask them, well, how much did you clear? And they don't know.
Yeah.
Like, they're just out there growing and selling. Well, that's like, I mean, in some cases, it's like, hey, we're buying watermelons for $1 and selling them for 75 cents and trying to make it up on volume.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
it's not going to work. That's a bad formula.
That's a bad model, right? So, and I've seen business owners do that. Like, they just get so focused on revenue. And then there's other people who get so focused on profit, like that, and that's better, right? So that's your take-home percentage.
Right.
But then if you go and spend 100% of that profit on your lifestyle,
Right.
you have zero wealth. And there's a handful of business owners that I've met that from their very early days, the thing that they were focused on is how profitable can I make this business so that I can then save it away and get a lump number. They were from the very beginning named a number that they wanted to have in a nest egg because
And live on the interest.
Yeah, because then wealth is
Unspent dollars.
choices.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and something that I tell people and remind myself of. It's like, okay, you do. It is a good practice to work on maybe always trying to increase your income, because the more you have coming in, the more choices you have, the more you can do, the faster you can hit your goals. But it's really more important. It's not as important how much you make as it is what you do with it, or how much you keep. Because I have seen people that make an above average household income who can't save $1,000 over, it takes them several months to save $1,000, and someone who makes half that income as them, and they're
Saves
like,
it
oh yeah, I
every
can save $1,000 this month, and their income is half of what that person's was. Maybe a very average income, and they're like, yeah, I could save $1,000. And lifestyle creep is a big problem too. It's just like the behavior part of oh, I got a raise, now I can go do X, Y, Z, and it's so easy to spend. I think that people don't know how to get control of that behavior of well, I'm making this much, I'm going to just spend it. I'm going to live my life. So I think that it's important to really define, after you've written out your budget and you know what your numbers are, if you're married, for sure, you and your spouse together need to name what your goals are so that you can get the direction, because the motive behind what's keeping you going in that direction is so important. Because if your goal is not to build wealth, then you will just spend all your money, because there's no, well, you can't take it with you when you die, so let's just maximize every dollar we have and finance things that we can't afford, because maybe it's like an identity thing too, of well, I'm never gonna be rich, I'm never gonna be like one of those millionaires, so I'm not gonna go my whole life and never have anything nice, so let's just go buy it now, even though we can't afford it.
Yeah.
And then you're just putting yourself in that hole, and now you're stuck.
Yeah.
And it takes a
pressure cooker that you
Right.
can't ever get out of. The ways to avoid living in debt, and Scripture talks a lot about,
debtor is slave to the lender.
Yeah, and raise your hand if you want to be a slave, right?
Not me.
Not
I
me.
want to be free. We talked about that in the past episode.
Yeah. So
I have a lot of choices.
Yeah, I want to have more choices. And if I'm borrowing money today, I am stealing from my future self.
That's right.
I am taking away a choice that I would have had, and future me is going to be pissed at past me, because I have enslaved myself in an effort to not do that. Really, the way to make sure that we are being responsible with the riches that we are handed.
Which again is the income every month.
Yep. Well, you have to live within your means, right? Essentially, which means that you have to increase your means,
Yeah.
or decrease your expenses.
Yeah, it really is. It's so common sense. The 80% of the equation, the behavior part.
Yeah.
Or no, sorry, excuse me. The 20% of it, the head knowledge of knowing how to handle your money, is so common sense.
Yeah.
If you make $5,000 a month, you can't spend $6,000 a month, or you're gonna go bankrupt eventually.
Yeah. Well, and we even had a guy walk in our office just kind of off the street. He thought he was looking for a kind of a payday loan place,
Right.
And you were trying to explain to him, if you make $1,000 a month and you spend $1,200 a month, and you think that you're going to fix that by going and getting a $2,000 loan.
Yeah.
You've just now added an extra payment.
You're treating the symptom and not the problem.
The problem is your system.
You can't borrow your way out of debt.
Right, which is, I think, what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
So the hard truth is, if you're frustrated because it doesn't seem like ends meet, then you really just have two choices. And I want you to, so if you're listening right now and you're frustrated with your finances, you have two choices. Choice number one, spend less. Choice number two, figure out how to earn more. Mm-hmm. In your experience, what are people more likely to try to do?
We just recorded another episode about personalities.
Yeah.
So it might have a little bit to do with personalities.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, go back and listen to the episode where we talk about the DISC profile, but so that you know what I'm talking about. But maybe a high D might be more prone to say, well, I'm just going to go earn more money. Mm-hmm. And a high S, which is what I am, is like, no, a dollar saved is more valuable than a dollar earned. I'm just going to do better with the money that I'm still going to try, but it's almost easier to just cut back than it is to go driving. So it might depend on the person's personality, but I think on that topic of a dollar saved is more valuable than a dollar earned, it should be easier just to cut back and say no. Mm-hmm. But then you got to say no to the hair appointment every single week, and you got to say no to the all things. Yep. You just have to be able to say no to consumption. So your question was, which one is easier, saying no or going and making more income?
I like your answer of it, Matt. It depends on personality.
I think it does. I think it depends
because in the world that the business owners that I coach. It's a quick answer.
I'll just go make more.
I'll just go make more.
I'll go sign another.
Make
another sale this week.
100%. And so there's a mentality there around, I'll just go get more, which is fine, so long as you don't then couple that with, and I'll spend more.
Yeah. In the physical fire, we say you can't out-exercise a poor diet or poor eating. I think in the professional fire, you cannot out-earn poor spending.
Well,
on an extreme level, you could.
Actually, I've seen some people do. I mean,
let's say the average person cannot out-earn their poor spending.
That's true, and you can have. I mean, Michael Jackson, the king of pop, died bankrupt. Mm-hmm. I mean,
what was it? I just heard the numbers on Mike Tyson, and he had earned like $400 million in his career, and it was all gone.
It's all gone.
At one, maybe it still is. I don't know, but
yeah.
At one point it was all gone.
You can spend it.
You can definitely.
Someone will help you spend your money.
Yeah.
So a fool and his money are quickly separated, right? So that's a proverb that I don't want to be true about me, right?
Don't be a fool.
So I think there's some people who are wired to go just blow the doors off. I'm going to go earn more. Mm-hmm. If that is you. Like if you think, man, I'm a hunter, I can go find an extra $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $100,000 a month, whatever the big number, whatever the increase are. And it's just zeros. The awareness for you is that the propensity that you have, the risk taking that you have to go out there and earn the money is the same characteristic that will have you burn through all of what you got. So you have to put a stopgap in there. You have to have a financial planner, or you have to have a system that is going to counteract your quick decision-making, high-risk behaviors that helped you earn all that money. Mm-hmm. Your gift in earning money is the same gift that will have you be poor, unless you put some kind of barrier, intentional barrier there. Mm-hmm. If you're a saver, right? Like probably the system, the thing that has you be a great saver and has you put more away, may also be the thing that prevents you from going out and taking on that job that's scary,
Sure,
the
absolutely.
the heavier, the higher responsibility, the more income that goes along with that.
Yeah, or if you're like, because I've seen super savers think they can save their way into wealth, and you can't do it. You have to invest your way into wealth, and so if because I've seen people who are like super savers, but then they just keep it in their savings account and their bank account, and they're losing money because of inflation.
There's no return on it because there's no risk associated.
Like they won't even go invest it in a super conservative investment like some mutual funds or something because they're scared they're going to lose it, and that's just not healthy either.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like the extreme of either one of those can be the detriment to you not building wealth or spending all your wealth.
Yeah, there's some risk necessary,
Absolutely,
in order to create income, but the wealth creation is a byproduct of what you choose to do with the income that you're given. But the person who makes, $100,000 a month and has allocated all of those dollars to taxes, to vehicle payments, to house payments, vacations, to second house payments, all those things, they don't have any more choices left. They've used up all of their choices.
Yeah.
Which makes them less free than the person who might earn a fraction of what they earn.
Right. So you kind of have to define what you want. I mean, do you want to look rich, or, because people absolutely, there's a broad spectrum of income levels.
Yep.
So, I think the average household income in the United States is $59,000 a year. Mm-hmm. So let's just go with that number. $60,000 a year, if that's the average household income, then take the average person. Do you want to build wealth, or do you want to look rich? Because I would argue that you can't really have both. Like you have to choose one of the or it's just going to take you longer to look rich because you probably need to pay cash for the things that you're doing rather than allocating every dollar every single month to all of your payments to have these things that make you look rich, like you're getting ahead.
It's interesting. You're talking about, there's the average family. Is that the average household?
I think that's the average household income.
$60K.
I can go look it up and double check, but I think that's right.
Yeah. And I would say it's not uncommon for me to interact with people who are earning $6 million a year.
Yeah.
And one of the things I can tell you is that $6 million a year does not make you happy. Actually, one of the primary reasons for starting the Four Fires nonprofit, or even writing the Four Fires philosophy, was because I came home and I was talking to my wife, and I was like, Allison, I'm working with a bunch of miserable millionaires. Mm-hmm. They have all this money, and
they're miserable.
And they're miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the great tragedy. The number is not success. It's the freedom that goes along with the professional fire that is the success in that fire. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. I would rather. I've had money. I've not had money. I'd rather have money.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But
that was another thing I just wrote down that maybe we could get into is kind of the two different approaches of if you're not rich, you're bad, or if you're poor, you're better. There's just these two far ends of the spectrum, so we can kind of get into
people's
that,
perception, and especially when it comes to their spirituality and money.
Yeah, because let's just go into it. So you and I had a conversation one time, and you said, "Well, which is better? Which of these two people would God be more pleased, or would God say, 'Well done'?" Mm-hmm. The person so let's take your numbers, 60,000 or 6 million a year.
Yeah.
So the person who makes $60,000 a year, and they borrow everything they can borrow to finance. They are just have debt up to their eyeballs and barely scraping by pennies every single month trying to make all these payments. And they're like, well, who can afford to tithe? I can't tithe. Look at all. I mean, I don't make enough money, and they're trying to live this lifestyle that they can't afford. Or the guy who makes $6 million a year and he's living on $400,000 of it because, I mean, how much money do you really need? And then he's just doing who knows what, all this good with the rest of it. Just the argument of like, oh, rich people are evil, and they versus I'm better because I'm. You just mentioned like I don't know. There's just what's it called, Gnosticism, where like you think you're better because you're poor, you're more holy.
Yeah.
And then the opposite of that was like the prosperity stuff of like if you're not rich, you're not right with God, which is totally.
Yeah.
What's the word? Starts with an H. Heresy.
Heinous.
Yeah, heresy, where it's like that is not scriptural at all. You can't back that up at all.
Yeah. You know, our perceptions of wealth, and we come, you know, everybody comes from a family where most people don't talk about sex and they don't talk about money. And what are the two primary reasons for divorce?
Sex and money.
Disagreements on sex and money. I mean, we should be talking about this with our kids, and that's another podcast in and of itself. We'll talk about, you know, how do we raise four-dimensional kids and what kind of conversations do we need to have. But the ability to talk about money and the ability to handle it well, one of the things I've noticed is that people who have lots of money are comfortable talking about it. In fact, I had an entrepreneur one time tell me, he said, Alan, I can tell very quickly how serious and what level guy I'm talking to when they ask me about my business. He said, most people will say, oh, you run a ABC company. What do you do? And that's all they want to know. He said, there's another level guy who'll come up to him and say, hey, how many employees do you have? Which is a nice kind of way of someone trying to like size up your business. He said, but from time to time, somebody will come up to me and go, oh, what's your rev number? And then specifically, someone will say, man, what's your margin on that? Oh.
It just tells you more about what that person's really asking you.
Well, and a lot of people would say, I wouldn't want to be that nosy.
Yeah.
But people who have money know how to talk about money. And they can have money conversations, and it's okay. Because they're comfortable. Like, you will never, I don't think you'll ever be wealthy if you're not comfortable having a conversation about it.
Or even, maybe it's even too, it's not just if you have lots of money, you know how to talk about it. Maybe it's, because I don't have lots of money yet, but I feel pretty confident about like knowing how to look at some numbers, and so maybe it's more of like people who understand how to handle money, people who understand the behavioral side of the equation, can have those conversations about money.
Yeah, I would argue that it is a necessary condition for creating wealth. Time is also a necessary condition for creating wealth.
Yeah, it's one of my greatest assets.
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah.
Time's ticking already, but
or it's the lack of time.
Yeah.
For you, you know, like you and I were talking about, there's a 20-year spread between the seat you're sitting in and the seat I'm sitting in. But even with the passage of time and the inability to understand and talk about money does not guarantee the acquisition of wealth.
No.
So
I can know how to be a bodybuilder. I can know all the science and the like calories and all that stuff. And I can know the exercises that I need to do, but if I don't do them, I'm never going to build that body.
And if you just go to the gym one day when you're 46 and try to like work really, really hard doing the thing, you've missed out on a lot. I mean, you can start from there. You can start at 46.
And you can make some progress.
Yeah. But you're not ever going to be anywhere close to the guy who started at 25. Like muscle and money both require consistent work over time.
Right. Well, the Bible says, he who gathers little by little will be increased. That's a proverb. I'll overlay. I don't know what the chapter or the verse number is, but I'll overlay that on the YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about that proverb a lot when like because I get overwhelmed by it. I'm like, how am I supposed to build wealth when I'm doing the best I can with what I have, and I'm always trying to like to increase the income and all this stuff. But it's like, man, I know that one of my greatest things is I'm 25, and I'm like, I am in this thing for decades. Like I'm already building wealth right now. I have it's not much, but I have a level of wealth that I have built over the last 3 years of my marriage. Yep. And if I don't ever stop over decades, it's going to be pretty cool. Because we've talked about there are some people who professionally they make it by the time they're 25 or 30 years old, and they are the exception. Where like they figured out how to make millions of dollars, and that's inspiring. It's awesome, but that's not the norm. Go hard. Let's build some wealth and let's do well, but don't feel like you're a failure if you're not making millions of dollars. Yeah. Let's still be a good steward of the money God has blessed you with.
One time I was talking to somebody about how long it was going to take for them to do a degree program, and they're like, oh my gosh, if I change my major, it's going to take me 3 years to do that. And do you know how long that is? Do you know how? And it's like, yeah. How old will you be in 3 years?
25.
And they were like 25, and it was like, and when you're 25, either way, 3 years from now, you're going to be 25.
Yeah.
You're either going to be 25 with a degree or 25 without a degree.
Yeah.
But in either case, those 3 years are going to pass.
Right.
So like when you made that comment, I'm in this thing for decades. Hopefully. Yeah, I mean, one way or the other. And so in 20 years, you're going to be 45.
Right. Do I want to look back and wish that I would have built some level of wealth over the last 20 years, or do I actually want to do it?
Yeah. So in this book, Psychology of Money, one of the other chapters talks about Warren Buffett's investing secret. And it's really phenomenal because it highlights what you just said. Warren Buffett is not the greatest investor of our time. He goes through and he names some other person who has gotten some kind of like radically different return than Warren Buffett. I forget the guy's name. Warren Buffett's secret is he started investing when he was 15 years old. And he's old now. And they said
he's probably coming up on like 100 years of investing. I mean, 115 years old or something.
Legitimately, time is the thing that
time in the market
really allows him to be this icon. So
I do want to speak to that too on just the topic of time. I had to make sure that I didn't fall into this, and I want the listeners to hear this too, is like, if you are young and you say, oh, I've got time, like this is going to be awesome, I've got time, don't get stagnant in that. Because before you know, like 3 years ago when I was 22 and I was just married, I was like, man, I have all this time. But it's already been 3 years, and I've been investing that whole time, and I could already just 3 years look back and like, dang, I should have started 3 years ago. So it's just like, don't get stagnant in that. If you do have the value of time right now, like start today.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a little bit.
I think early on, and when I first met you, there was a book called Automatic Millionaire.
I never read that one.
Okay. So that book was pretty impactful for me, because one of the things it talked about in terms of financial behaviors is that it's very hard to consistently make good decisions. So what the book is encouraging people to do is to not trust that every month you're going to write that $500 check to your savings account.
Right. Or to your Roth or whatever.
Yeah.
To your investment, your retirement.
It's the same guy who wrote Smart Couples Finish Rich.
Oh, David Bach?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the same concepts that are...
That book was very impactful for me.
Yeah, and I think that was a repackaging of Automatic Millionaire into a couples book. And so the principle there is you don't have to be smart every month. You don't have to be disciplined every month. With finance, you can just be disciplined once.
Make the automation.
Make the automatic payment.
Yeah.
Like have it auto withdraw and put in. So the decision that you can make, young or old, is auto draft
Yeah.
savings. Because when you don't, I mean, it's amazing. Like when I've chosen to like overpay on my mortgage, choose it once. Like if every month, if my mortgage was $1,000, and every month I'm sitting there choosing to write the check of like, am I going to pay $1,500 this month? Or do I want that in my household operating account? But if you just set it on auto draft, it's $1,500
every month.
Then that mortgage gets paid down a whole lot faster, and you just learn to live off of
Yeah.
what you have left.
Yeah.
And so be bold and courageous once
Yeah.
when you're signing up for auto draft.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try to put a bow on this.
Yeah.
When you talk about riches, being rich, the metric for that is monthly income. But the metric
And spending it. It's
well, I mean, you can be rich. You can have lots of monthly income. It doesn't mean that you are spending it, but you have access to this month. You're going to get some money, and that makes you rich on some sliding scale of richness. Wealth is the unspent, consumption. So the metric for being rich is what your household income is. The metric for wealth could be your savings account, but it could also be your net worth.
net worth for sure. And then even, I think a lot about, this is just me personally, I think about specifically with financial wealth, the type of peace that may come with it. Of just like, okay, if everything went to crap, I could pay all of my expenses for 6 months, and I could find a job in that 6 month window. So I've got this. In the grand scheme of things, it's this pretty small amount of wealth that would pay my bills for 6 months, and that is what motivates me to do well in the professional fire, not to have all these really nice things and everybody's like, man, Jeff Rice, man, can't hide money. That guy's just got it going on. I'm more concerned with having peace in my household, and going back to the common sense thing, it's like save for a rainy day. You save money so that you can survive the storm, because a storm's coming. My pastor, he'll say that line on stage, and he's like, and people say, you need to be more positive. And he's like, I'm positive. A storm is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's so true. But at the same time, like, I will also say, getting to a point in your profession where you have access to an income that makes some of life's challenges not so challenging. So one of the things I talk about with business owners all the time is it's only a problem if you can't delegate it or write a check for it. And there are some problems in life that you can solve with a checkbook if you have done the work to get the income level. And so it is this dual piece of grow the income, don't spend all of the income,
Right.
That I think is probably the ideal situation. And then you couple that with, and I didn't sell my soul or my physical health or my marriage or my relationships with my kids or friends in order to obtain it.
Right. Balance. The Four Fires is about balance.
Yeah. What is it for a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul or marriage or relationship with his kids or friends in the process?
Right.
So the psychology of money,
It
really is. Winning with money is much more about behaviors than it is education. If you're over there wondering if you're making the right choice, make a choice to save. You'll be better off. I highly recommend reading that book.
And let us know in the comments if there's something that we said in this podcast that maybe you'd want to hear more on, or if we didn't go the route that you I don't know if there's more on this topic
Yeah,
of
you
the
could-
professional fire and
You can talk about money
crap.
for days.
Right. So let us know in the comments if there's another segue or a topic that you want to hear about
For sure.
on the topic of cash and money.
If you handle it well, it will create less stress in your people fire. It can give you access to some tools to eat well, to exercise well, can allow you to serve your children well. I mean, money, there's a lot of good that money can do on the planet.
So, Alan, thanks so much for hanging out and talking. I always enjoy it. And, guys, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Four Fires Podcast.